So we're going to talk about slope, and in this section we're going to go over specifically like how do you find slope, so what's the equation for that, and then how can we use slope to graph lines. So instead of having to do what we were looking at on that worksheet of like putting in different numbers for your x value and then having to graph, because in that one it's a lot of like guessing and checking, there is a much better way when it comes to graphing a line using its slope and also using something called the y-intercept, which we'll talk about too. So slope is the ratio of the change in the y-coordinates to the change in the x-coordinates. So you guys have maybe heard of it as like rise over run. So rise would be like how much it goes up and down. Run would be how much it goes left and right. So up and down would be your y-coordinates. Left and right would be your x-coordinates. So they give you the slope equation right here. And I would say this piece is what you're going to use the most today when you're trying to find slope. So the change would just be like the difference. So you're going to subtract. So you're going to take y2 minus y1, and you're going to put that over x2 minus x1. And they show you a picture here of where that would come from. So like what's your x1, what's your y1, what's your x2, what's your y2. So when you have a line, you are just looking for 2 points on that line. Or they might give you 2 points. They might give you 2 coordinates. So it doesn't matter which one you call x1, y1, and which one is x2, y2, just as long as you name those points with one of them. Then plug it into your equation, and that should help you find slope. So this box kind of summarizes all of that stuff, where we're talking about the change in y-coordinates to the change in x-coordinates, so that rise over run, and we're using this equation to find that. Now the letter m is used to help us talk about slope. So if you see m in an equation, or if they give you, like in a problem, it says m equals a number, that's telling you what the slope of that line would be. So we're going to practice this. The first thing we want to do is just find the slope if they give us a pair of points. We're going to do the first one together. So we've got -1, 4, and then 1, -2. If it helps you, I would go ahead and write underneath those points, label it x1, y1, x2, y2. If you need that for plugging into your equation. Okay, so my equation said it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, like that. So just plug in how you labeled it. So I'm going to put -2 in, -4, and then 1 minus -1. Now, it really doesn't matter the order that you did that. So if you had labeled it opposite, or if you did 4 minus -2, -1 minus 1, you're going to get the same answer. Just make sure however you set up the y's, you set up the x's the same way, that you don't flip-flop them. So -2 minus 4 is going to be -6. And then 1 minus a -1, this becomes a plus sign here. Think of that keep, change, change rule. So that just becomes 2. So then we divide -6 by 2, and we get -3 for our slope. Okay, so take a minute or two and do number 2. Find the slope using those 2 points, -8, 11, 24, -9. Does anyone have an answer they want to share with me? Did anybody else get negative 5 over 8? Yes or no? It's okay. So let's talk about it, even if you got it. Like I said, if it helps you, label these. Like this first point would be x1, y1, x2, y2, like that. So on top, you do y2 minus y1. So negative 9 minus 11. And then on the bottom, it'd be 24 minus negative 8. If you have it switched, that's okay. If you did 11 minus negative 9 and negative 8 minus 24, it should not affect your answer at all. So if I do this, negative 9 minus 11 is going to be negative 20. 24 minus negative 8, again, you've got those double negatives. So keep, change, change. Change this to an addition problem. So that's going to be 32. I can reduce this. Okay, I can take a 4 out of both of those numbers. So take 20 divided by 4, 32 divided by 4. And if we do that, negative 20 divided by 4 would be negative 5. 32 divided by 4 would be 8. So I got the same thing. If you switched it, so if you did 11 minus negative 9, negative 8 minus 24, the numbers should be the same, but the negative is probably going to be sitting on the bottom because you're going to have that negative 32. It doesn't matter where the negative sits in the fraction, whether it's in top or in the bottom, it makes the whole thing negative. So when you write your final answer, I don't care if you keep the negative with the number or if you just throw it out in the front of the fraction, because either way, it's a negative slope now, which means that line is going to go down instead of going up. Okay, so now that we know how to find slope, we're going to talk about how do we use slope and how do we use the y-intercept to help us graph these lines. So if you guys turn your page over, this says that we're going to graph the line using the slope and the y-intercept. So I want to review with you guys really quick, like what's the y-intercept, because we've talked about slope already. So y-intercept is like the point on the graph that the line actually crosses the y-axis. So it's usually the letter B in the equation. So a lot of these we're going to be talking about today are in this form y equals mx plus b. That's called slope-intercept form. The m is your slope. Your b is going to be that y-intercept. So b, that number at the end, so whatever you're adding or subtracting at the end of your equation, that's where you're going to start your line at. So that's going to tell you whether you go up or down a certain amount. Then from that one point, from that y-intercept, then you use your slope. And slope is going to be that rise over run. So if it's a fraction, then you've got your two numbers. You go up or down, and then you go left or right. Now if it's a whole number, like we saw in number 1, we got negative 3. That's technically over a 1 if we write it as a fraction. So we do still have a fraction there. We just might have to think of it that way. For this first example, they have it written in y equals mx plus b form already for us. So I'm going to say that this 3 is my slope. So I'm going to say m is equal to 3. And my b is equal to 2. Because that's that plus 2 at the end of the equation. So these are like the two things that you really want to be able to find from an equation in order for you to be able to graph them. So I'm going to put my graph up here now. So to start, we start at that B point, which B is equal to 2. That means from 0, 0, which is in the middle of the graph, you're going to go up 2 and draw a point. Now, slope is 3, which as a fraction would be the same thing as 3 over 1. And you might want to write that because that helps you know what's your rise and what's your run. So the rise is the top number. That means that tells you how much you go up or down from your point. So I'm at 2. That top number is 3, so I'm going to go up 3. And 1 is on the bottom, so I'm going to go to the right 1. Now, when you're graphing, it's possible that either the graph that's provided or the graph that you drew ends up not being quite right. Like you run out of space, like there's no place for you to put the point. That doesn't mean that you have to erase and start over. You can go the exact opposite directions to graph another point than what we just did. So we had gone up 3 and to the right 1. I could also go down 3 and to the left 1 if I wanted to. So from that y-intercept point 2, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, and to the left 1 and draw another point. It should still line up with those other 2 points because we're looking for straight lines here. So you can do that as many times as you guys want. You really only need 2 points to make a line. But you could do 3 or 4 or even more than that if you feel like you need more points to get a line drawn. Once you've got some points there, you need to draw the line. If you have a straight edge, so if you have like a ruler, or if you have like your lunch card is great to use, or even like the edge of your planner or something like that, those work really nicely to like lay flat against those points and then draw your straight line. For myself, I'm going to freehand these up here and hopefully not do too terrible of a job. But if I was doing it on paper, I would grab something with a flat edge that I could use, because it just makes the lines look a lot cleaner instead of them being kind of zigzaggy or bumpy. Okay, so let's look at the next one in your guys' notes. Y equals negative 2/3 x minus 3. Let's start by identifying the slope and the y-intercept first. Can you guys tell me what's m going to be equal to? What number in this equation is the slope? Good, negative 2/3. So that means b is going to be what? Good, negative 3. Make sure that you take the negative with it, because it's minus 3. So that sign goes with the number. So if it's negative, you got to pull that. All right, so for my graph, my b is negative 3. So from 0, 0, which direction do I go for negative 3? Do I go up 3 or down 3? Good, down. 1, 2, 3. Okay, slope is negative 2 over 3. So from this b, my y-intercept point, negative 2 means I go down 2, and then 3 is positive, so I go to the right, 1, 2, 3. Or you can go up 2 and to the left 3. Because remember I said it doesn't matter for a fraction which number is the negative number. One of them is going to be negative. And then draw your line. So notice how on the first one, the slope was 3. And this one has a slope of negative 2/3. So the number 1 had a positive slope, so the line went up over time. It was increasing. This one has a negative slope, so it's decreasing over time. It's going down. Okay, let's look at the next one here. Number 3 says y equals 4x. What's your slope for this problem? Four over 1, okay, or you can write just 4, and then when we use it for y over 1, you might want to think of it as 4 over 1. What's my b, though? 0. Good. There is no b for this one. If there's nothing added or subtracted to your equation, that means that your b is 0. So what that means as far as like starting this graph, it's going to start at 0, 0. You're going to draw a point in the center of your graph. So we're going to start with a point at 0, 0, right there in the middle. Can you guys tell me what directions I would go for my 4 over 1? Like, am I going to go up, down, left, right? Good. Up 4, right 1. Or you could go down 4, left 1. But this line should be going up again because it's a positive slope. 4 is positive, so this line should be increasing over time. All right, if we turn the page over in our packet, we've got just a few more examples here. So for this one, it's not written in y equals mx plus b form. Remember, I wrote that earlier, and I said this is what we're going to be using a lot today to graph. If something is not written in that form, we need to rewrite what they gave us so that it looks like that. So the thing you need to think about is, how do I get y all by itself? How do I solve for y? So this one we have 3x plus y equals negative 6. I need to move that 3x over to the other side. I'm going to do that by subtracting it. So I'm going to do minus 3x from both sides of the equation. So on the left side, those 3x's cancel, which is what I want to have happen because I'm moving it. So I'm left with y equals, now I have this negative 6 and this minus 3x. We cannot combine those because one of them has an x and one of them is just a plain number. So we need to write it, though, in that mx plus b form. That way you don't get your slope and your y-intercept confused. So you always want the x term to come first, so that's going to be that minus 3x. And then you want your b term, which is going to be negative 6 because it has that negative sign in front of it. So make sure you write minus 6. So now, if we do what we were doing before, because now it's in that y equals mx plus b form, my slope, m, is going to be negative 3, which we can think of as negative 3 over 1. And my b is going to be negative 6. So I just had to do a little bit more work at the start to get the equation how I wanted it. Now I can graph it just like we were doing before. So we're going to start down at negative 6. For my slope, it's negative 3 over 1. So I'm going to go down 3 to the right 1. Or we're going to go up 3 to the left 1. And then draw your line. So number 5 in your guys' notes is really similar to number 4. You have to rewrite it first. And then state your slope and your b and graph it. So I want you guys to try to do this one. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Try to do the whole thing. So can you guys tell me what you did to rewrite this equation? How'd you get y by itself? Subtract x from both sides. So we have y equals, I would have put the x first, so it's a negative x and then plus 5. So what does that mean our slope is? What's m? -1. And you can write that as a fraction. You could do -1 over 1. How about my b? Good, 5. So when we go to graph this one, you guys should start up at 5. So from 0, 0, go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then go down 1 to the right one. Down 1 to the right one. Again, you can do that as many times as you feel like you need to get this line going. Did you guys look like mine? Good. Okay, last one in your packet. This one says y minus 4 equals 0. There's no x. Okay? So there's going to be no slope for this problem because there's no x term. Again, though, I still want to get y by itself. So how would I get rid of that minus 4? What would I do to it to move it to the other side? Yep, you have to add it. So plus 4. So we have y equals 4. So when you guys first talked about lines, like graphing lines back probably in Algebra 1, you probably talked about the different types of slope. There's negative slope, positive slope, there's something called no slope, and there's also one called undefined slope. This is a case where there's no slope because there's no x term. So when you go to graph this one, it's y equals 4. So on the y-axis, which would be the one going up and down, you're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to draw a straight horizontal line through that point. No slope means that it's not increasing or decreasing. So if you're walking on flat sidewalk, that would have no slope. If it inclines, like if you go up a hill, that's positive slope. If you go down a hill, that would be negative slope. A case that would be undefined would be if you had x equaled a number. And those lines go straight up and down through an x value. Those have an undefined slope because we're not able to find it because you end up dividing by 0, which doesn't work. But this is a case where you have 0 slope. It's a nice flat line. All right.